So I want to tell you about a book today. The book is called The Gulag Archipelago. You ready? I can't believe that all of you decided that coming to talk about the topics we're going to talk about tonight was the top priority in your life. Well, thank you all very much for coming. It's really shocking to me that you don't have anything better to do on a Tuesday night. But let's see if we can justify that. You know, that might be a good aim. See if we could make it worthwhile. So to make your decision correct. So well, that was nice. I don't like to give the same talk twice. Well, I already know what your problem is.
Hello, doctor.
So these creatures engage in dominance disputes. And I think dominance is the right way to think about it, because lobsters aren't very empathic and they're not very social. And so it really is the toughest lobster that wins. You know, and what's so cool about the lobster is that when a lobster wins, he flexes and gets bigger. So he looks bigger because he's a winner. It's like he's advertising that. And the neurochemical system that makes him flex is serotonergic. And you think, well, who cares? What the hell does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It's the same chemical that's affected by antidepressants in human beings. And so, like, if you're depressed, you're a defeated lobster. Like, you're like this. I'm small. I'm not, you know, things are dangerous. I don't want to fight. You give somebody an antidepressant, it's like up they stretch, and then they're ready to, like, take on the world again. Well, if you give lobsters who just got defeated in a fight serotonin, then they stretch out and they'll fight again. And that's, like, we separated from those creatures on the evolutionary timescale somewhere between 350 and 600 million years ago, and the damn neurochemistry is the same. Lobster. There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. Agreeableness. And if you add neuroticism and agreeableness together, I have to do the math because I have to take the square root. It's 0.5. I can't do that in front of a class, unfortunately. Now, you're actually blushing, you know, you're actually blushing about that. That's very, very funny. So, sorry to point it out, but it's so comical, you know.
And that's fine, you're saying that's fine.
No, I really think
the patriarchal system is just fine.
That's silly. I do. I think that's silly. I really do. I mean, look at your situation. You're hardly unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I have battled quite hard to get where I've got to.
Good
so that's
for you.
okay. Battling is good. This is all about the fight.
It's inevitable.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like, you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
And I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah. It took a while.
It did, yeah.
It took a while.
And there were all these, like, monsters in there weightlifting, and, like, they were monsters. I remember one guy who was tattooed everywhere, and he had, like, a huge scar running down the middle of his chest. It looked like somebody had hit him with an axe, and, you know, and I was in there, and I had this weird cape that I used to wear that I bought in Portugal, and some boots that went along with it. And another thing happened. I met another guy out there, and then a week or two later, I heard that he and a friend of his had held another guy down and pulverized his left leg with a lead pipe, like, just pulverized it. And the reason for that was that they thought that he was a snitch, and maybe he was.
I was wondering if you had the energy to answer how someone might help someone that has borderline personality disorder.
By example. By example.
Give an example.
No, I don't mean that precisely. I mean that let's not take borderline personality disorder precisely as the example, okay? I understand the question. The question to some degree is, how do you help someone that's lost? And the answer to that is, look, I had this friend, sorry. There's been a lot of depression in our family, so it's a question that cuts close to the bone. What could have I done? What could have I done differently? This is the problem with suicide. It leaves everybody behind thinking, oh my God, what could have I done? I could have treated the person better. I could have listened. I could have been there. It's like, and she was just beating herself up about this, really feeling that she wasn't a useful person, that she'd failed as a grandmother. She's a really good person, you know. And so I went for a walk with her, and I said, and she's married, and she likes her husband, and he's a really good guy. And I said, look, you're blaming yourself for your granddaughter's suicide. It's like, are you blaming your husband? Are you sitting him down and telling him what a useless bastard he was as a grandfather because his granddaughter committed suicide and how he failed completely? She said, no, I'd never do that. So I said, well, don't do it to yourself. You have to admire Hitler. That's the thing. You know, you could be getting up earlier. You could be watching YouTube less, unless they're my videos, in which case you could be watching them more. Anyways, can't believe I said that, actually. I actually can't believe I said that. And one of the things he would do is have a temper tantrum, and during the temper tantrum, he would hold his bloody breath until he turned blue. It's like, try that. Like, you know, that's your homework. Go home and have a temper tantrum, and while you're doing it, hold your breath until you actually turn blue. It's like, you won't be able to do it. You don't have the willpower of a 2-year-old, that's for sure. There's a whole group online called Men Going Their Own Way, MGTOW. You know, if you're a woman who has trouble with men, or you're a man who has trouble with women, it's not the women and it's not the men, it's you. I don't want to have anything to do with women. It's like, you're a pathetic weasel. That's the same statement. Adam, get a girlfriend. Some of the potatoes they're no longer potatoes, right? They've half returned to Mother Earth. He knew nothing, at least in part because he was always listening to the voice of his daemon, his internal conscience. And then I just found out the other day that the word democracy comes from the same root, which is really interesting. Like, I had no idea that was the case. Here's your breakfast. It's like, no, man, that's not breakfast. That's hell. I am not going to be a mouthpiece for language that I detest. And that's that. New Age people are very creative, but they can't think critically. But I can think critically. God, wake up! Most governments in the world are run by thugs, absolute thugs. They'll kick in your door and kill you in your sleep. You have to kind of be high in openness to like my lectures. And God only knows what you'd be like if you turned yourself completely on. And maybe I could use a better metaphor.
But that's a straw man, because no one says there's anything toxic about masculinity per se.
What do you mean no one says that? The
use-
term exists.
No. Well, no.
Or you can, be some weaselly coward and go in there and snivel about how awful your life is. Yeah, well, it happens all the time.
It happens to me.
Yeah.
She'll
Christina,
never admit it.
No, it happens during our podcast.
I think everybody understands that. Anyways, the cricket tells Pinocchio what he has to do. And then something kind of paradoxical happens. Anyways, people often use antidepressants to cure depression, hence their name. I've received many letters and many comments from friends of mine in college who've been criticizing everything I say. And no wonder. I don't speak perfectly, and my arguments aren't perfectly formulated, and neither are anyone else's. And we have to be able to say what we have to say badly, or we won't be able to think at all. And I know where that leads. I've studied totalitarianism for 4 decades, and I know how it starts. The sponge reflex. What's the world to a sponge? The world is what makes you go like this or like that. That's it. When I had little kids, I made this kind of wrestling ring out of these 2 couches that we had that would hook together. And I'd bring them on there and, toss them up in the air and catch them, 8, 10 feet. No. No. That called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich first. That was published in the early 1960s. When there was a brief thaw, Stalin... I'll take responsibility for what I say. I am not saying your words. This is a tool, and these are tools, and this is a tool, and I'm a tool for, although I'd never admit it, Darwin's trick with the snake that I told you about. He'd go to this museum that had a cobra in a glass cage, and the cobra, he'd put his face up to the glass cage, and the cobra would strike at him, and he'd go like this, and there was no way he could control that.
No, but the thing, what I'm trying to get is that when you're telling people to empower themselves.
I wouldn't say that, because I'd never used that word.
Empower them?
I hate that word, but it's okay.
To become
I'm
stronger.
encouraging people.
Yeah.
I like that word better, because I'm encouraging people.
Yeah.
To put courage into them. That's better. Anyways. Uh-oh, now I probably lost my place. All right, dogs, smell. Where were we going with that? Rats. Yes, and what's that? Frozen, yes, okay, so the rat, that's the one. Now, rats are quite similar to human beings, as it turns out. I could say especially postmodernists, but I won't. And it's a book that's very much like Maps of Meaning, because I believe that Maps of Meaning has been written 4 times.
Well, just tell us quickly, like, how you met your wife. You met her when you were 7 or 8 or...
Yeah, in grade 3.
In grade 3?
Yeah.
And did you fall in love with her in grade 3? In grade 3?
Yeah.
And was it mutual? Not in the beginning.
She wouldn't admit it if it was. Well, who the hell wants to grow up to be Captain Hook? First of all, you've got a hook. Second, you're a tyrant. And third, you're chased by the dragon of chaos with a clock in its stomach. Right? The crocodile. It's already got a piece of you. Well, that's what happens when you get older. And the closer the kid gets to the edge, the more fun it is for both. That seems... I was thinking maybe I'd just carry him in on a cross.
Yeah, right.
I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. Okay, here's another way of thinking about it. The winged reptile is a thing of the earth and a thing of the sky. So you could think about it as a thing of matter and a thing of spirit. A cyclops is like a giant penis, by the way. I mean, from a symbolic perspective, it's the same idea, because it's usually something masculine and single-minded. These teenagers don't do very well. Introverted, depressed, anxious, depressed. Sorry, I said that twice. And so I would say that as spokesfrog, I'm announcing that there's something polluted about the water in which we're all swimming, and that we better clean it up, or there's going to be trouble. Well, you can only see things that are in front of you, not things that are to the side or behind you. You can only see a very narrow you can only see a very narrow chunk of the electromagnetic spectrum, roughly that chunk that enables you to see by sunlight and to detect ripe fruit and that sort of thing. And information means information. There's a rule too if you're a lifeguard. Some of you have had lifeguard training. How do you approach someone who's drowning and panicking in the water? Feet out, right, like this. It's like, I'll save you, but that doesn't mean you get to drown me while I'm doing it. And if it's you drown or both of us drown, it's you drown. And that's wisdom.
How would your life have been different if you'd been born female?
Multiple orgasms.
It's not a bad one.
Sorry. See, that's what happens when I don't have any Diet Coke. So anyways, otherwise you underestimate.
Is this positive psych?
No, it's maps of meaning. Positive psych. It's definitely not that.
Why red? Why red?
Why red?
Yes.
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure why. Oh, that's wrong. I do know why red. Ripe fruit. Women have co-evolved with ripe fruit.